My name doesn't matter here. What matters is the mistake that put me in this place, and what I did after nobody bothered to fix it. It started with a form. Somewhere in a busy recruitment office on a space station I had never heard of, a clerk typed the wrong code into a database. That code was supposed to mark me as an engineer candidate. Instead, it marked me as a member of an apex predator species, eligible for enrollment in the most feared military training program in the galaxy, Predator Academy. I found out about the mistake 3 days into my journey there, when I read the fine print on my transfer papers. By then, the ship was already deep in transit, and turning back would have taken months. I had a choice. I could report the error and go home in shame, or I could stay quiet and see what happened. I stayed quiet. I told myself it was curiosity. Really, it was pride. The Academy sat on a moon with 2 suns and gravity slightly higher than what I was used to. When the transport doors opened, the first thing I felt was the weight pressing down on my shoulders. The second thing I felt was every eye in the landing bay turning toward me. They were enormous. Some had scaled skin and claws long enough to open a door without touching the handle. Others had rows of teeth built for tearing, or muscles that rippled under skin thick as armor. These were species built by evolution for exactly one purpose: hunting. And then there was me, a soft, hairless, comparatively fragile human, standing among them with a duffel bag over my shoulder. Nobody said a word at first. They just stared. Then came the laughter. "There must be a mistake," one of them said, a tall reptilian creature with ridged brows. "This one smells like fear already." I didn't argue. I picked up my bag and walked toward the barracks, ignoring the whispers that followed me the whole way. The instructors were no kinder. On the first morning, a towering officer named Instructor Van walked down the line of new recruits, inspecting each one. When he reached me, he stopped and looked me up and down like I was a broken piece of equipment. "You are either the bravest creature I have ever seen," he said, "or the biggest paperwork error in Academy history. Time will tell which." The other recruits laughed again. I kept my eyes forward and said nothing. That first week was designed to break people. The trials were not simple obstacle courses. They were tests of pain tolerance, endurance, and instinct. Recruits who couldn't handle the pressure were sent home within days. I watched several powerful-looking aliens quit before the first week ended, unable to handle the mental strain, even though their bodies were more than strong enough. I noticed something important during that week. Strength wasn't the only thing that mattered here. Endurance mattered. Patience mattered. And most of all, the ability to stay calm under pressure mattered more than anything else. This was something I understood. Humans are not the strongest creatures in the universe. We don't have claws or venom or natural armor, but we have learned, over thousands of years, how to survive using our minds. We plan. We adapt. We endure discomfort without giving up. These were skills built into me long before I ever set foot on that moon. The first real test came during a survival exercise in the Academy's training wilderness, a massive artificial environment filled with extreme heat, freezing nights, and simulated dangers. Recruits were dropped in pairs, forced to survive for 4 days with minimal supplies. I was paired with a recruit named Drassic, a heavily built alien with thick gray hide and an attitude that suggested he saw me as dead weight. On the first night, he made it clear he expected me to fail. "Stay close," he grumbled, "so I don't have to explain your disappearance to the instructors." I didn't argue. Instead, I got to work. While he relied on his natural resistance to cold and hunger, I built a shelter using materials most predators would ignore. I created a water filtration system out of scrap cloth and sand. I rationed our food carefully, tracking hours and calories in my head, while Drassic ate whenever he felt like it. By the 3rd day, Drassic's confidence had cracked. His body was strong, but his planning was weak. My careful preparation meant we had food and water left when his instincts told him we should have run out already. "How did you know to do that?" he asked, staring at the neat stack of supplies I had preserved. "I didn't know," I said. "I planned for it." That was the moment his attitude toward me began to shift, even if he didn't say it directly. Word about the survival exercise spread through the barracks. Some recruits began to watch me differently, not with laughter now, but with quiet curiosity. Instructor Van noticed too. During the next debrief, He looked at me for a long moment before speaking to the group. "It seems our little mistake has a mind worth paying attention to," he said. "Let's see if the body can keep up." The next major trial was a controlled combat exercise designed to test each recruit's ability to handle direct physical confrontation. This was where predators were expected to shine, and where everyone assumed I would finally be exposed as a fraud. My opponent was chosen carefully by the instructors, likely as a message. His name was Korath, the current top-ranked recruit in our class. He was faster and stronger than almost anyone else at the academy, and confident enough to smile when he saw me step onto the training platform. "This will be quick," he said. The rules were simple. No serious injuries allowed, only controlled sparring meant to test technique, endurance, and strategy. The first recruit to be pinned for 3 seconds would lose. Korath came at me immediately, using his natural speed to close the distance before I could react. I dodged, barely, and felt the wind from his swing brush past my shoulder. He was fast, faster than I expected, and stronger than anyone I had ever trained against. I realized quickly that meeting his strength head-on would be a losing strategy. Instead, I focused on movement, using the space around me instead of trying to match his power. I circled, ducked, and used his own momentum against him whenever he lunged too aggressively. Minutes passed. The crowd of recruits watching grew louder, their murmurs shifting from mockery to genuine interest. Korath's frustration began to show as his attacks became less controlled and more desperate. He wasn't used to a fight lasting this long. Then came his mistake. He lunged hard, expecting me to dodge sideways like I had before. Instead, I stepped forward, using his forward momentum to redirect his weight to the ground. It wasn't strength that put him down, it was timing. 3 seconds later, the match was over. Silence fell across the training hall. Korath stared up at me from the ground, breathing hard, more shocked than angry. Slowly, recruits began murmuring among themselves, no longer laughing, but studying me carefully, like they were trying to understand something they hadn't expected to find in a creature like me. From that day forward, the atmosphere around me changed completely. Predators who had once ignored me began watching my every move, trying to understand how someone so physically unremarkable had defeated one of their strongest. Some approached me for advice on strategy, others avoided me entirely, unsettled by the fact that their instincts couldn't predict what I would do next. I began to understand something important during this time. Fear, for predator species, usually came from raw power, something they could measure and respect. But my kind of fear was different. It came from unpredictability. They couldn't calculate my next move using instinct alone, and that uncertainty bothered them more than any physical threat could. As the weeks passed, I continued to adapt. I studied my classmates carefully, learning their strengths and weaknesses, just as I had learned my own. I built relationships with a few recruits who respected calculated thinking, including Dracic, who slowly became something like a friend, even if he never admitted it directly. The final trial of our training cycle was the Academy's most demanding test, a multi-day challenge combining survival, strategy, and direct competition. This trial determined the top-ranked recruits, the ones who would go on to elite assignments across known space. My final opponent in the last stage was Instructor Van's personal favorite, a massive predator named Threxa, known for never losing a single match during her entire time at the Academy. She was faster, stronger, and more experienced than anyone I had faced before. Before the match began, she looked at me with something between curiosity and respect. "I've heard about you," she said. "Let's see if the stories are true." The fight was long and difficult. She was overwhelming in raw power, forcing me to rely entirely on patience and precision. Every mistake I made cost me dearly, and there were moments when I thought I wouldn't be able to continue. But I remembered something important. Predators are trained to end fights quickly, using overwhelming force before their opponent can recover. They are not trained to endure a long, drawn-out battle of patience. As the match extended longer than she expected, I noticed her movements becoming slightly less controlled, her breathing slightly more labored. In the final moments, when she believed she had cornered me completely, I used the last of my strength to redirect her charge, just as I had done with Korath weeks earlier. It wasn't overwhelming force that won the match. It was outlasting her, refusing to break under pressure until the very end. When the match ended, the training hall was completely silent. Threxa stared at me, breathing heavily, and then, slowly, she extended her hand in a gesture of respect I hadn't expected. "I have never lost before," she said quietly. "I suppose there's a first time for everything." That night, Instructor Van called me to his office. I expected another lecture about paperwork errors and unlikely circumstances. Instead, he looked at me with something I hadn't seen from him before: genuine respect. "You were never supposed to be here," he said, "but somehow, you've become one of the most talked about recruits in Academy history." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "The others fear you now," he continued. "Not because you are the strongest, or the fastest. They fear you because they cannot predict you. That, in some ways, is more dangerous than any claw or fang. Looking back now, I understand what happened during those months. Predator Academy was built for beings whose bodies were shaped by evolution into perfect weapons. I never belonged there, not by their standards. But somewhere between the survival trials, the sparring matches, and the long nights of careful planning, I proved that strength isn't only physical. Humans were never meant to walk those halls, and maybe that's exactly why I did.